I have a question for you. Do you want to be a human? Or do you want to be a transhuman? We have a decision to make as humanity on what timeline do we want to experience on this planet moving into our future. With the attack on small businesses that we've experienced in 2020 and the invisible enemy that we can call the COVID that has created this dependency on the government and the undercover intention to gain authoritative control over resources. Even the human body and life is seen as a resource. All for a potential timeline where we are going to be considered a transhuman, where our whole economy is going to have what we know as cryptocurrency. That is it has a robot software and artificial intelligence that will gain more control over what we can think, what we can say, what we can share. That will start to support the billionaires, but leaving us as humans not sovereign. More like what we see with the social credit going on in the Chinese, where in order to gain a certain income or to gain a certain privilege to take a plane or to even have access to organic foods, you have to meet this certain social credit that's going on with the Chinese. And if we are, again, I'm an American living in the US, if we are to clear away the Second Amendment, which is something that will not happen, and like Australia, who gave their guns away, right? And in doing so had major restrictions that was quite aggressive for a period of time, where Australians in many ways could not go outside except for an hour per day. And if there was any hint of sort of rebellious behavior, a major aggression from the military, all because of the Australians getting rid of their guns due to, I believe, again, an invisible enemy, right? A lot of times, invisible enemy could be this sort of this terrorist, right? That is used by the government to take away the guns of all Australians. Of course, that wouldn't happen in the U.S. with such our desire for freedom. When we think of Lady Liberty as a statement of our sort of accomplished freedom and our strive for constant freedom, a transhuman is basically a human that, or you can say, moving into a timeline where human is in association with robot, software, artificial intelligence. And the robots will sort of take on possibly the responsibilities that that requires more of a mind, and leaving the humans with particular other responsibilities, right? And this is kind of a part of the eliminating of small businesses. for, billionaires to have more of a full control, right? Because think about it, because we are the majority in many ways, that in order for, I guess, I'll call the billionaires, which is not all, but a group, we'll say, a group, that in order for a select few to have control of the majority, there has to be the majority needs to have major restriction in order for the majority to not be rebellious. And since, we as a planet in our history, time and time again, going thousands of years on this planet, have seen the majority create a rebellion, a lot of this social credit, when I think of like the Chinese, is a lot to do with minimizing the possibility of rebellion. So when we look at the timeline of human, we are looking at, which I see, right? I see that we are moving into this timeline where we want to be more human and not less, right? Less human is like when we think of like, injecting like this little nano type of, controlling of the mind type of graying of the graying of the pituitary gland, I'll say, right? It could even be the controlling of fertility, meaning making people infertile to control, right, the population. That's what I call like a transhuman, where human is starting to be affected by robots and software, artificial intelligence, to the point where humans don't even have their own sovereignty or common sense or critical thought anymore. And the human is what we see, and when we think of the small businesses of humans using their intelligence, their brilliance, right, their ingenuity, their creative mind to we think manifest, right? A lot of times we think of human, and the excellence is law of attraction, manifestation, and we see a lot of that growing up, becoming a young adult from teenhood. I mean, there were so many elders that I look to who were teaching about the law of attraction, manifestation, who actually did manifest their own small business and became profitable off of their own sovereignty. That's a human, right? And my understanding of like the past, where we've been, right, on this planet Earth, and even going thousands of years, when we think of like the pharaohs, and it's like a common patriarchal scheme or strategy or type of agenda that we've seen time and time again. I think how we're going to break it is more people, I wouldn't say more people becoming just, millionaires, but more people becoming, being able to hold a certain wealth in for their own creative intelligence, their own creative reality, right? Because the thing about like Nikola Tesla and even Edgar Cayce, why these individuals were somewhat seen as revolutionary and they were just being creative, right, is because they were able to sort of bring major sort of systematic shift to the economic system. We were able to shift it. Just a person such as Edgar Cayce or Nikola Tesla, right, because of their ingenuity, their ability to use their sovereignty, their common sense, their critical thought, they were able to bring the shift to the systematic hold that we've experienced for thousands of years in this patriarchal, right, time, where there's just such a focus in this whole patriarchal period of thousands of years, medieval time, Romanesque, Roman, going further back. There's such an emphasis on the power struggle, the wanting of the power, right? And I think how we're going to able to break through what I call this karma, right? Which to me, karma is about a repeating habit or repeating pattern. Like when we think of like, we all have this sort of thought of like, okay, there could be a World War III, right? Because we've experienced the pattern, right? It's a pattern that we've had on this planet that we haven't necessarily broken free from, right? And I think that this sort of system that is wanting to be implemented onto this planet globally, right? We can think about agendas about like the reset, right? That kind of thing, which is about the controlling of the resources, but also in a way where it's like to get organics is like you have to have a certain social credit score, right? And then if you don't meet that, you just have to go for the kind of the foods that are like poisonous, right? You don't get certain access to certain things, right? When it comes to your land, you may not have ownership over your land, even if it's bought and paid for, right? For 5 generations. When it comes to your jobs and your ability to make a certain income or have a certain job, right? It's like social credit. And I think what's going on this planet is because we as human beings are desiring, the collective desiring to break through this patriarchal system that we've had, and the system is really sort of collapsing. Even when I think about the presidency, right, and the sort of obvious fraud that is going on, it's like I've never right, I never even thought about like fraud within like the elections, right? Even though I mean a lot of people talk about that even when I was young, but it was so obvious, right, to all of us that there was some kind of fraud that was going on within the election. Even now, it's like Biden is considered the president in the media, but then Trump is actually the president. So it's like there's two presidents. like okay, who's the president? Like, you read on like Times Magazine, it's like Biden, but then when you go on more of, I guess, a site or that has more of a credible, or I won't say credible, but I would say that is, I guess, more formal, right? They call him the president-elect, right? So that to me just feels like so much of fraud mixed up in that, right? Why there's considered to be two presidents, and we're all Time Magazine says Biden, and then yet Trump's in the White House. It's right. It's so obvious. And I think because why there's so much, even with the small businesses, starting to think about the riots, and how small businesses like being like demolished and stuff, and it's like you could go to the Walmart, where you're around, at least, I mean, hundreds of people. Walmart's pretty big, and yet you can't go into a small business, right, where maybe a small business have like maybe 10, 20 people, right? So again, it gives this kind of idea that there's a supporting of the bigger, the bigger corporations, but then there's a kind of wanting to bankrupt or completely close small businesses, like in the vast majority. Because I think a lot of it, what's going on is that people, through their own creative intelligence and their sovereignty, are finding ways to make their own income, which is, it's a part of the humanness of us. It's a part of our craftsmanship. It's a part of our growth and evolution as a human. But when you take that away, and we've seen that even in ancient past, humans start to function more as like cattle, right? Where they're just used for their labor or just used for their mind in a way that is to benefit those others, right? And, I start to think about like these, a few, these elite or, billionaire few. And, I feel like though a lot of times we just see them as white men, let's just be honest. I mean, white men, that are these the global type of elite, I'll just say. And the thing about the power struggle, it's like it creates this apathy where these certain group of people feel that they're a superior civilization, even like they're like a different species of human, like they live in their own civilization while we, the majority, are in our own kind of different civilization that is seen as lesser, like they're more evolved, right? But the thing is, when I look at like these particular men, right, or billionaires, I feel like a lot of the generational wealth in earlier times, like we go back to medieval or Roman, it had a lot to do with taking the power from previous power holders, right? So it's like a certain person or a group of people reach a certain, wealth caliber, and then another group get, usually the poor, or gets really agitated by all of the kind of the apathy and the taking away the humanness, that they rebel. And then you take out the person who has who's gained the power, right, through basically taking out somebody else, and then they become the power, right? So I think we need to change that karma wheel when it comes to power, when the way that we force our way in, like some sort of revolt, and then we take out the king and we become the king type of vibe, right? Medieval sort of scenario. And then what happens is, because we haven't really developed a humanness or of a strong character, yes, we may get this certain power or whatever, but like these billionaires we think today, but we don't have the humanness. So it's just a repeating cycle. And I think a lot of these billionaires, they probably may be scared about rebellions, right? Because, I mean, you can name them like just real quick, and you don't even need to be like a historian. All the revolutions we've experienced due to the same kind of repeating the pattern. We're taking away the humanness, right? Making humans just seen as machines, or seen just for labor, like cattle, like African Americans. In many ways, it was a money system, a very lucrative money system. You can make a lot of money off of selling your African American slaves. But what happened is, through the running away and the sort of just the rebellious nature of just not wanting that anymore, raid, is what caused the sort of collapse. And I think with where we are right now as humanity, it's very important for us to decide the timeline that we want. Because we can be complacent for too long, right? And not pay attention, right? And start to continue to buy into this like slave system. I mean, even talking about this, like we've been around the block as humanity. Like, this shouldn't be something that's just new. Like, oh, I was naive to that. Like, we've been around the block. We've seen this type of thing again and again, right? So it's kind of like a logic train of thought to think, okay, well, if we keep doing it again and again in our past, I mean, it would make sense that it could happen again, right? So I think the way that we're going to break through, because of we have this technology and we've never had it before, is to using the technologies, the internet, to, like many people have done. There's online businesses, or really using it for your creative and your creative reality, your creative profit, I will say. And that's the one thing that really brings the human to us, right? When I think about the tribe, right? Being a part of a tribe. And there's such a character development, such a development of the human within a more tribal sort of system, right? I mean, of course, the population is a lot lower, and it's a different type of human experience than what a lot of times we see with the system that we have now, where we give so much power to an elite group. But in the tribal group, it's more of like, I feel like there's so much development of the mind that happens in a more tribal setting, because it's like, when I think of even like the currency, it's like circulated among all the people. So then all the people have the opportunity to really advance their mind, right? And to really work on their creativity, or work on their whatever it is that brings them excellence. But then in this, this, I call this hierarchical caste system that we've had, it's like it's took away the human excellence. And a lot of times, looking at people, it's just, you could see like just how limited people feel. Like it's just so caught in this money type of mindset, like this money, this lack, right? And you can see like, looking sometimes people wanting to be these billionaires and millionaires, and I think that that's wonderful to strive for that. But I know people who want that, right? And maybe who have obtained that, and knowing who they are as a person, and their reason for wanting that is creating an apathy. It's creating a disconnection to humanity. And that's the thing that we need to reparent, or we need to break through this strive for million or billion, but coming from a place of apathy, coming from a place of like desperation, or coming from a place of lack. We need to start thinking of, what do I have to offer to the economy that creates a continuity? What I have to offer the economy that brings excellence, right? To the continuity of the planet, right? Because like I said, I think it's just, it just feels a lot more fulfilling when you live on a planet where you can experience the creative reality of not just yourself, but of many people, right? Like I said, like with Edgar Cayce, Nikola Tesla, there's so many people that I kind of have in my mind space when I think of excellence, right? And it's so well rounded. It's all kinds of different areas of excellence, and that's what makes a human very well rounded and grounded, and also very compassionate. But as there are groups of people who start to disconnect from human and the excellence of the creative reality, and start to get more into like, in the advancements of robots and in software and artificial intelligence, what happens is they start to become so interested in just getting the resources, right? Getting the resources, or having the control of the resources, or having the resources in their leadership, and not viewing humanity and the majority as beings who come to Earth to actually have a sort of personal evolution. And I think that's, why for me, why I've watched so many documentaries on like, cattle, and how the meat, meat is created, to kind of bring an awareness, so that I don't get into that pattern of looking at maybe a species that seems less as me as, oh, that's just for me. The cattle, that's for me, right? They don't have any evolution. All they do is just moo and eat the grass, and just, they don't really do much. Right? So I'm just going to use them for me, right? I can make big bucks out of a cattle business for me, right? And that kind of disconnect with the species, and not having like a humanness, the deep apathy is what if that happens to us, right? What if there's a sort of species that seems more advanced than us, and looking at us as, well, you're like, all you do is just sit around and watch TV all day. I'm just going to use you for my, my human farming business that's going to make me really, right? And not really care about the process that you must go through in order for me to extract something from you, right? So I think what I see, right, going on right now is that human beings will be triggered to use personal power and to be triggered to use common sense, which I've already been seeing, to really get real with what kind of system we want to create for our kids and our grandkids on this planet. Because honestly, I'm sure a lot of people, especially older people, like my mother's generation, agree that, I mean, we don't necessarily need these robots, and we don't necessarily need all the software, and we definitely don't necessarily need artificial intelligence, because I've seen, like, in many ways, it can, I would say, dumb down our intelligence. Because instead of, I mean, again, we can get access to all this information, which is lovely, get all the access to different people, and instantly it can contact somebody in Japan. But when we give too much power to that in the way that we're not using our own sovereignty, our own common sense or critical thought to really think for ourselves, then we can start to lose the ingenuity of ourselves, which is the ability to have our own mind that's not plugged into something else. And I think that's a big question that we'll have in the future, but also a question about, what kind of economy do we want to have on this planet? And I think the importance of small businesses is that people, you're seeing that we as humans, we're very tribal. You can see that in the small businesses. Like when I went to, Asheville, North Carolina, and I just was like, whoa, like seeing all these kinds of small businesses and seeing the creative excellence of human, it just fills you with so much inspiration, right? And seeing that these people created it off of their own mind, right? Not having, maybe not having generational wealth or not having privilege or just through their own manifestation. And I think that's what we want to return to. But then there's also great resistance with that, because they're like, when we think of the Chinese, it's completely against a tribal way, completely against that, right? There is no sense of tribal ways in that thing where you could gain a certain merit through your creativity, craftsmanship, and sort of develop your own your own exchange, right? You could trade and be really profitable at that, and be a part of a renaissance. I think as long as, with what I see the Chinese with the social credit thing, there is no renaissance in that, right? And when humans start to feel like they're just for their, labor or something like that, or just, they're a resource for something, it really just continues this habit or this pattern, this karma, I'll say, of just people getting so agitated by their atrophied excellence, where they just create a rebellion just to get a renaissance going on in their mind, in their life, right? And we see that again and again. But I think this time was going to be different, the way that we're going to break through this, whatever is going on, that we can sense. In many ways, it feels so obvious. Like I said, with the fraud of the presidency in the US, it just seems so obvious. And then even when I'm thinking about the vaccines, it feels so obvious about wanting to implement something very quickly. And that's kind of a little bit alarming, right? To want to implement something so quickly that even is written that it's not ready. It's experimentative type of, right? And then seeing so much of like COVID cases going up, and I'm living in a major city. I'm just thinking, like, I've drive by a lot of times of Kaiser, and a lot of times it's just empty. So I living in a large, I'm like, where are all these deaths that are happening, right? Where are all these deaths happening if I'm driving by Kaiser and I don't really see anybody, right? And then hearing from, other sheriffs and other, county that there really is no COVID cases, it's kind of like, okay, where's this coming from, right? And I think a part of, again, a strategy that's so obvious to me now, like you don't even need to be a historian to just, it's such, you see the repetitive, right, the ness of different, medieval, like Roman periods, and it's the same strategy, right, going all the way to like the pharaohs, where there's an invisible enemy that makes you, very dependent on the government, and then you become so dependent and so like fearful that you're willing to do anything just to get whatever you think that is going to protect you, right? But that thing in our past, we've seen that is supposedly supposed to protect you, it really doesn't. For example, Andrew Jackson saying to the Cherokee Indians that, oh, if you go to the Oklahoma territory, you're going to be safe, right? And the invisible fear for Andrew Jackson, the Cherokee Indians, is that, well, Europeans are coming and they want your land, and there's gold in your land. So, and I can't expect I can't promise that you won't be attacked or something. But then in going to these quote unquote, these new lands, in the process of that, so many people died of illness and all kinds of things. And then so much like damage happened, right? So I think, not being naive is something that we have to have in order to break through any patriarchal type of systematic hold that we've been in as a collective, right? Even with the Spaniards, right, who came to South America, and they were purposely giving out like cloth, like blankets, to the indigenous people, right? Knowing that knowing that the cloth, right, the blankets that they were distributing out to the, as a quote unquote offering, it was going to kill the indigenous people, because they knew that, the Europeans carried in those blankets all kinds of, foul bacterias that the indigenous people, they had an immune system that would completely, right, shut down, and they would kill them, because they've never been exposed to such foul bacterias from Europe, right? As a way to a way to lower the population of the indigenous people, so that in war, you have the upper hand, you have the most people, because everyone else is dead, right? So, I mean, it's like, I say this with a sort of bringing awareness to where we've been and the karma that we're facing of our past, and how we can break through that, so that we are not just like with the indigenous people. I mean, they were so like, you giving us blankets, thank you so much, and not realizing, wait a minute, right? You would never think, right? You would never think the Spaniards would do that, distribute them just to kind of, give them some bacteria or something that would kill them. So, these kind of power struggle we've seen time and time again, it's like desperate, right? To do anything, to get whatever you, it's almost like we've seen in our past such an obsession. Like, we've seen obsession with God to the point where you create the Crusades and everyone's killing each other for centuries. Obsession with the God, my God. Obsession with the gold. Oh my gosh, we've seen that. Oh my God, California, I mean, whoa. The obsession with gold. I mean, the indigenous people here, you could actually, it was legal to kill them. And you would get money if you killed the indigenous. You would literally get money by whoever is paying, right, for the gold, because the indigenous people, the land had a lot of gold and they were in the way, that kind of thing, right? I mean, obsessions with, glory, to the point where you would, give high taxes, like what I would call insanity, type of taxes in medieval time, so that you could have the money to finance your palace or whatever it is that you're the king you want, right? So I think that we have such a patriarchal past, where this obsession, power struggle, God, glory, gold. And now, we're in a technology age, which we haven't experienced in, thousands of years, that now, the obsessions are starting to transform, right? Where now that we're having this robotic and artificial intelligence and this software, I think that there's still the same obsession, maybe not so much about, the God and my God, right? Or the gold, right? Or so much of the glory, right? Because a lot of it seems, these billionaires seem very like hidden, right? They don't want to be seen, right? Type of thing, or, but I think a lot of it has to do now with the wanting to preserve a system. That could be the new obsession, wanting to preserve an old system, old rulership system. Because, when I think about like advancements in technology, like with Edgar Cayce or not Edgar Cayce, Nikola Tesla, all having a brilliant mind, and part of a civilization that is, far more advanced than who we are today. And I actually think that we have the advanced technology somewhere, right, where we could get rid of fossil fuel, where we could get rid of a lot of this non-renewable sort of energy that we're using, like completely remove it in like a month. It's just everything would collapse quite brutally. So, but I do feel a part of the importance of preserving the humanness of ourselves, because we don't want to, it's like, it's okay if we're treating the cattle like they're less species that, for our own, gain, and extract what we need. But what if we're that species, right? And there's a high, so there's a sort of, there's a sort of emotional maturity or evolution that we have to have as human beings, right? In order to remember our more tribal connection to Earth and other species. And that's why there's so much of an awakening when we think of the matriarchal, because the matriarchal is a more tribal life. In the tribal life, there's more of a reverence towards animals, right? Where you may kill the buffalo, but it's not like the way we treat the cattle. Let me get the meat so I can, the sort of desperation, anxiety, right? It's very reverent. It's actually seen as an art form, right? Not just a manufacturing belt. It's an art form, right? And I think there's an elder system. There's more of sharing of knowledge and sharing of not knowledge, not in the form of education, but the form of like how to be excellent as a human, right? Education is wonderful, but there's a different, the excellence of human is also being able to access the creative mind within you. So I think I see a lot of that happening. A more matriarchal kind of civilization is of our, I guess, our ancient past. A tribal kind of setting is sort of returning into our communities, into small businesses, into sharing online, into new ideas in like psychology or therapy, or new ideas within, health and wellness, or new ideas in the way that we're sharing ourselves more courageously. That's very matriarchal. When you're expressing yourself courageously, or when you're creating something, a business out of your own merit, it's very matriarchal in the way that you are possessing a sort of humanness, in the way that you want to be free, right? That's very tribal, that kind of, supporting of the freedom, and the excellence. But I think, because so many people feel scrambled and like they're not with the right people, divorces is going, so many people in many ways are getting divorces, because they're just realizing that they want more of a tribal connection or tribal community or tribal just, it's just a mindset. I love the continuity of the sharing. But because, so much of that tribal ways of us is going to be completely like demolished in some ways, that we a lot of people feel very misplaced, and then we think about the population getting higher, right? And then we think about people, all the people that they just don't even feel good about themselves. It's like so many people don't even feel good about themselves. It's like we have, the population is higher, but it's almost like we felt better about ourselves when we had a lower population. So it's showing that maybe we're with people that we're not really want to be with, but we're not being honest with ourselves. And that's the thing. I feel a lot of times we allow people to get away with things or take advantage, and then we start to shy and hide and not even work on the human, not even evolve ourselves. It's because we just don't want to be honest with ourselves. I know so many people, in many ways that are in like relationships or family dynamics that it's complacent, right? They don't feel the humanness of their freedom, their personal power, right? But feeling the kind of, I just don't feel good enough, or I feel disconnected from my belonging. So I'll just go for whatever and just put up with whatever. So a lot of that tribal ways of this matriarchal kind of, dignity, has a lot to do with, no, it's not just whatever. There's an excellence that you can develop within yourself. So the excellence of our human, I think, yes, we can go the Roblox software and the AI, right? But I think a part of a greater excellence is being able to develop your creative reality and and be able to share that and to share that in big, bold, courageous ways through your personal growth. Because I think the more that complacent we become, the more that we start to just put up with things and allow things to happen, and then later on regret it and then start to rebel. So this is the perfect time for us as human beings to really ask ourselves, do we want to be transhuman or we want to be human? Because there's different timelines for both. And anything that may seem superior or seem, elite or is more dominating or the controlling or overpowering, right now, because everything is shifting and shaking, is the perfect time for us to get clear about what kind of reality do we want to live in for our kids and grandkids. But I think there's accountability that we have to have as each human beings. Like, we have to do something, right? It's kind of like asking for, we want a certain outcome, but then we're just going to be complacent about the whole thing, right? There's a sort of accountability that we have to have as humans. If we want to preserve the humanness of ourselves and get more in touch with the human excellence or the creative reality of ourselves, then we're going to have to, there's a sort of courage that we're going to have, or a certain expansion or evolution personal that we're going to have to make that happen. And I think a part of whatever this agenda is, that is kind of in the US sort of following this sort of Chinese pathway that is very oppressive, especially for the US, because we're so much about the freedom, right? So much about the freedom, is just preserving a system that it's just not going to work. For our future on this earth, a system that it just makes us feel less, makes us feel weak. You know, a lot of times when I see people have that poverty consciousness or this lack mentality where they're just so obsessed about money, it's just weak, right? Not even having a connection to their own law of attraction or manifestation. Just complacent, settling for that. I'm not even feeling good. I think the way for us to start feeling good about ourselves as human beings is getting in touch with, again, that matriarchal. I mean, we don't even know what that is. People don't even say matriarchal. People don't even know what that looks like, because the whole society and system is shrouded by patriarchal. So we don't even know what that looks like, but we can feel it, right? We have some kind of remembrance or some slight residue of that. And I think a lot of the humanness and the human development of the human evolution emotionally and even consciousness wise is the matriarchal remembrance of what we were doing in times of tribal gatherings that really brought about awakenings to us, where we started to have more of an awareness of other species and a sort of respect and reverence, right? Where we started to bring honesty to our lives and weren't so tempted in these obsessions with whatever it is that we think we need to get. Like sometimes I just feel some people are so obsessed with just being millionaires that when they get it, it's like, okay, what do you have to offer to your community, to the economy, besides just you earning your earnings? Where's your continuity? Are these ideas you're sharing going to create a sort of awakening in other people? And I do see a lot of the sort of sharing and creating continuity. I do see that very much. And the more that we continue on that pathway of sharing the excellence, we're going to create a renaissance. And that's what I feel. We can create a renaissance on this planet, which is nothing to do with robots, artificial intelligence, and software. I'm talking a renaissance that comes directly from the human mind, not from human mind, nano controlled type of mind. Not a mind that is raising the consciousness, meditating, the mind that is accessing the creative reality of the universe through one's own direct connection to that. That's the renaissance that I see for ourselves. And where the power struggle, we start to break through that power struggle and start to step more into the focus on the human excellence, is what I would like to say. Because a lot of this, this, when I think about this patriarchal, control, there's just a lot of there's a lot of, I don't even know what word to say. There's a lot of lack of integrity, right? Lack of integrity, lack of responsibility, in that we've seen for thousands of years. And I think when we start to work on our humanness or human evolution, it personally within the community collective, again, matriarchal type of focus on the human raising its vibration, we'll say, I think that we'll start to override or even start to transmute, I'll say, a lot of the patriarchal ways of gaining or earning or sort of obtaining things that comes from a more, sometimes it comes from a foul place that we've seen, a foul place. That you just when you hear people in interviews talk about like the things that they seen or done when they were in these kind of companies or in these kind of corporations or with these sort of banks or dealings, they're like, it's foul, right? And I think it doesn't have to be like that, right? I think that we can, but a lot of it has to do with this matriarchal sort of resurrection, and using that sort of knowledge, or that sort of tribal kind of setting, to bring more of the dignity to the humanness, so that everything is of accountability. There is accountability. You can't just get away with things. It's not just free for all, and you could do whatever you want. And I think that's what makes humans a lot smarter, because when there's accountability and responsibility, there also is a greater integrity. And I think that's something the matriarchal type of culture or civilization is about. Whenever I think of matriarchal culture or civilization, a lot of times I do think about the integrity through accountability and responsibility that one has just inherited in them because of the society they live in. It's put so much focus on the merits, the development of the humanness, the human mind, not the making human brainwash, or making the human mind dull and dim and drained, because that doesn't do anything but make people weak mentally. But the developing of the mind, not just through like education, yes, education, but also through like freedom, right? Because you can be educated in the mind to be like a part of, the Nazi in the Hitler time. Like you can be educated, and the education is so good you become the best Nazi, right? I'm talking about education where there's like a freedom, right? There's a creative reality. There's a renaissance going on, and renaissance is not about indoctrination. It's about self-expression. It's about uncovering the universe through your perception, and allowing the continuity around you of the elders, and of people being wise around you to really expand your imagination. So if we can focus on the creative reality of the human being, and feel the balancing of the patriarchal that we've had thus far sort of merge with the matriarchal that I don't think a lot of us think about or even have any remembrance of, I think that we can start to see more of a society that will have a sort of backbone and integrity and accountability and a responsibility, instead of just a complacency or an obsession, right? Or being naive to the point where you're agitated, you're annoyed, you're just in this fear, but you have no reason why you're in fear. No critical thought, no common sense about it. Because I think personally with the population, right, when we think of the population, getting higher in like 2050, right, getting too high where, you need these ghost cities, right, that are like cities, I think in like Asia, China, where you have complete ghost cities that were built by the government that can hold at least, I think, 60,000 people, maybe more. Right, nobody lives there, because I think it has to do with expecting a major boom, like a baby boom, or more people. But I think as we again have this more matriarchal and patriarchal kind of connection, emergence, and sort of call it checks and balances, right, where you're allowing the matriarchal sort of dignity to check you. The checks and balances within our own humanness is important. I think that naturally humans, because they'll have a desire to want to develop their creative reality, they'll be more inclined to maybe wait before they have kids. When humans feel good about themselves, they don't feel so much a rush to just get with somebody, right? Or people will start to wait, right? People will be more like cautious about their children, right? Having kids, or, when people get tribal energy, people are more aware. They're not just selfish, right? And this patriarchal thousands of years we've had, it's created a deep selfishness, because when there's lack, and then there's this hustle, like this aggression and competition, it just creates this selfishness where, you walk around and everybody's just for themselves. And that's a huge patriarchal kind of, I would say, default that happened in the obsession with God, glory, gold, is that it created this separation among people where they felt like they can't rely on nobody. It's just them, their own, they want their own thing. And not understanding that in a more matriarchal, sort of dignity, we want things so that we can share, so that we can create a continuity, so that we can create more of a renaissance on this planet, which is not about one person. One person does not create a renaissance. It's that person that sparks the imagination of many that creates a renaissance. It's like not Einstein that brought the wealth of the universe to our awareness. It's Einstein that opened the door for others to go inside and explore for themselves, to retrieve information that can expand upon the the Einstein. So this is a matriarchal kind of dignity, accountability, and responsibility that we have, that can help us to become more aware and alert of other species of animals, of ourselves, and of what's going on, so we can be more honest with ourselves. And when we feel good about ourselves, and we've have some personal evolution, and we're not just stagnant, complacent, and hiding, and feeling ashamed and all that stuff, we just feel a lot more capable of manifesting, capable of a certain life experience. But when you're just like, in an environment where everyone's just oppressed, and everyone's just depressed, and everyone has no rights, or everyone is just complacent and just completely disconnected from their humanness, it's a planet that is very dull as a whole. It's a planet that's very dull. So the more that we start to, have a personal evolution, accountability, responsibility, start to bring courage to our awareness, bring courage to our creative reality, and focusing on the renaissance of ourselves and the continuity and the sharing of that, I feel that we're going to be able to really bring more of a patriarchal checks and balances to this matriarchal checks and balances to this patriarchal magic show and hoax and charlatan and shit show that we've had, in the way of like the divide and conquer, and the way of the invisible enemy, as a way to kind of get humans in a position that really does not bring anyone anywhere, right? And I think it's all because of the obsession with power. And that obsession with power creates a power struggle. Because when you don't have a creative reality, or you don't have a creative mind, all you have is just force. I think that it creates such a dullness within a human being. And I think we are pretty much over and done with that. We're done with the dullness. We don't want to be dull, and we don't want to have dullness being fed to us. We want to raise our consciousness, raise our vibration, so that we can step into a complete new paradigm with our system that we have, our economy. And I think it's happening now. The shifting is happening. It's just we have to really anchor responsibility and accountability in order for us to successfully really anchor in a humanness that is excellent, not a humanness that is dull, a humanness that is excellent. And the sharing of that, and the generosity of the continuity, the sort of tribal ways of that. We can have a tribal ways within a sort of, metropolitan area. In a city, you can still feel that tribal ways. You see it when you go, Asheville, or even imagine even, LA, New York, you could feel that within the big, omega type of people, population. So I just wanted to share this discussion because we're in 2021 and we're going to, we're going to have to face some things. And I think of things that we're going to have to face is the continuing closing of the small businesses in certain cities, right? As the continued closing of small businesses will, close, right? And then maybe the high taxing of the small businesses this year, right? This 2021 year, that is absurd, right? And having to bring, even with student debt, that as well, there's pressure with that, right? Of getting that probably wiped clean for everyone in the US because of, right? And then the vaccines is another thing, right? In Europe, I think they're already protesting about the vaccines and other, right? About the having the rights to one's own body. And, I think with vaccines, it's something that personally I feel like we don't need. If it's for immune therapy, just the sun, right? And there's been proven to be other sort of more natural remedies that we can take to build up our immune system, right? That we don't necessarily need that. And hearing about you need a vaccine sort of wristband, we'll say, to ride a plane or to go to work or go to school, I feel like that's very problematic because we've seen in our history, right, that in many ways these type of agendas that are very wide kind of spread in that have a sense of control, like a limitation. Like if you don't get it, you're sort of in a group. If you don't get it, then you're sort of in a group that's considered like rebellious, right, or disobedient, right? That type. We've seen that type of thing, like these grouping of people, and we've seen in our past it actually has been not so good. It's not led to anything good, right? So I think that with that, there's some big choices we'll have to make, even with, the presidency of the US with Biden Trump. I think there's sort of decisions that we will have to make collectively that is not going to be easy. But the more that we focus on accountability and responsibility, I think we will be able to create enough desire for excellence for humankind that we will be able to override anything that wants to go against human excellence and wants the humanists, which is the majority, to be in a dull state, in a gray state, where human is unable to manifest its own, its own sort of contribution to the renaissance of humanity. So I'm going to leave you guys with these thoughts, and Satnam.